Episode 5 of Africa is called Sahara, and this episode opens up in the north of Africa, where it's snowing, not what you'd expect from the Sahara, very much in keeping with the rest of the series, and here we see barbarian macaques. We just talked about how this was part of a much wider population, but when the Sahara spread, it cut them off, and they're now stuck here in the Atlas Mountains, and from there we talk about how truly apocalyptic the Sahara Desert actually is. Every time we've focused on another habitat in this series, we've talked about how kind of beneficial it is to the animals. Here we're very much dealing with the opposite of that. We're basically dealing with animals that are fighting the Sahara, and there's a lot of shots throughout the episode just showing you how intimidating the Sahara Desert is. All these vast rocky mountains that look really barren and bleak, carved out sand sculptures. It's really horrific, and that's exemplified by the sandstorm sequence. The sandstorms look pretty intimidating. They're really massive. You get this satellite footage, one that's like thousands of miles wide. It's pretty incredible, and it does a pretty good job of showing you that this is a really, really difficult place to live, and it's such a massive part of the continent of Africa. It's actually quite crazy. And from there we start dealing with some of the more familiar animals. We focus on Grevy Zebra for a bit. We see this one male, he's got his territory, and these females wander in, and he's got to try and fight other males to mate with them. It's an alright sequence, it's pretty good. You don't get a lot of zebra sequences, I don't think. They don't pop up that much, considering they're quite iconic animals. They're kind of like giraffes in that sense, in that you don't tend to see them that often. So actually this is quite a good zebra sequence. It's one of the best ones we've had. It's very different, because usually you're used to seeing zebras, you know, traversing the plains in big herds. It shows that the Sahara Desert just can't support the same amount of life that they can in the rest of Africa. And then we look at naked mole rats, another pretty famous animal. There's pretty creepy music playing throughout this sequence, but we don't really see them doing anything that creepy. We basically just focus on their colony living. Obviously, naked mole rats are eusocial. They're the only eusocial mammals. We basically kind of focus on the different castes within the colony, and then we see this one female. She's a princess of the colony, and she leaves to start her own one. We see her wandering around above ground, which is pretty rare to see. You don't see that very often in naked mole rats. And she meets this male, and they start their own wee colony. And it's a nice wee sequence. It kind of hams up the tyrannical nature of naked mole rats without really delving into it too deeply, so I'm not sure how well it worked in that sense, but it was pretty good. It's a pretty good sequence. And then we talk about swallows. We see swallows in Nigeria. Now, I'm used to seeing swallows pretty regularly in the summer, but you never really think of the image of swallows in Africa, but that's obviously where they spend quite a lot of the year. And then we see that they're going to migrate north, but they have to cross the Sahara to do so, and we kind of link up with the swallows again later on in the episode. But it's quite a good image, and it's something you don't really think about being from Britain, that these animals you see quite a lot throughout the summer actually nest in, you know, a pretty tropical part of the world, the other side of the Sahara Desert, in fact. And we see the resurrection plant. We saw that in Green Planet, but I think this might actually be better. It's kind of the same thing. We see it basically drying out for years on end, and then when some rains come, they're able to flower and grow a bit, but then the heat of the Sahara ultimately kills it in the end, and it goes back to what it was before. It's an alright sequence. Then we talk about how the Sahara Desert was a relatively recent phenomenon. It didn't happen until like 6,000 years ago, so there's quite a lot of the land that was actually a lot more lush, supported a lot more life. You see all these cave drawings of these things like rhinos, giraffes and stuff like that, things that were once there. And we even see this little pocket of savannah in Tunisia where there's these addax just roaming. That was quite cool. It just goes to show you that Northern Africa was a much more diverse place once upon a time. And we see camels. We often think of camels as being, you know, the ultimate desert survivors, but it's not really the case, because the camels here need humans to guide them through the desert, and they ultimately couldn't make their homes in the Sahara permanently. But the camels offer a bonanza for dung beetles. The dung beetle sequence is one of the more memorable ones from the episode, I think. It's pretty funny. We see this one dung beetle. It's basically just got a big roll of camel shit, and it's trying to roll up a sand dune, but it keeps rolling down, and it's got to keep pushing it back up. It's just quite a nice light-hearted sequence in an otherwise bleak and barren episode. It's quite good. I quite enjoyed it. And then we start focusing on oases, little pockets where there's some water. We see this one pool full of fish called Chalapino, I think it's called. That might be completely mispronounced. I do apologise if it is. I'm not thinking of jalapenos, don't worry. And we see how they're eaten by crocodiles at night. This is quite cool, because you'd kind of think in the desert the crocodiles would be pretty small. The shots of them from above make them look pretty big. I mean, they may not be as big as the ones in, like, say, the Okavango Delta, but, you know, they're still pretty big animals. And I thought that was pretty cool. When I think of the Sahara Desert, for some reason I think of crocodiles, and I think that's because of, you know, ancient Egypt and Egyptian mythology. So yeah, I thought that was cool. I thought that was a good sequence. And we link back in with the swallows. When they encounter an oasis, well, it looks really cool, it looks really lush. This oasis is actually pretty toxic. The salt content of the water is so high that it's basically a brine, and ultimately it can't be drunk. However, there's all these brine flies there that actually make the water more palatable, because they're able to drink it and filter off all the salt. So the swallows actually get a drink in the form of the flies. That's quite a cool sequence. You get the sense that these flies are a proper lifeline for the swallows, because, you know, otherwise they're just in a desert. It basically hams up how you can have to take your opportunities when you get them in the Sahara. And then we focus on the dunes themselves. The dunes themselves are pretty interesting. The singing dunes are a pretty iconic bit of this episode, I think. The noises that the dunes make are pretty cool. And we see how far the dunes actually move. They use time-lapse to show that. It's pretty cool. I think I did know about that at the time, but I can't say I'd ever seen it before, so that was pretty cool. And the kind of last major bit of footage we get is about the most hardy animal in the Sahara Desert, and that's the silver ant. We see all these other animals, these lizards that have to basically run for cover in the heat of the day, but the silver ants can come out because they've got these silvery furry hairs covering their bodies that reflect the sun's rays. But even though they're able to be out there in the desert in the heat of the day, they still can't be out there for too long. They've basically got a time span of like minutes, like 10 minutes. They've got to get all their food. And this is a pretty cool sequence. This is the highlight of the episode for me, I think. We see the silver ants scurrying out into the desert, looking for food. They find flies, they find bits of foliage, they find insects, and they've got to bring it back. But you do feel like they're on the clock. The music does a great job of ramping up the tension there, and it's almost kind of extraterrestrial as well. It does feel like you're on another planet. They get to the point where some of the ants are dying, they just can't cope with the heat, and they've got this massive fly that they just can't carry back, so they've just got to dismember it and bring it back. And when it gets to the point where the ants are rushing back into their colony, you really are like, right, come on, wrap this up. That was a really, really good sequence, a really cool animal. They did appear in the Trials of Life, however, I'd say this sequence is better. And also that series came out in the 90s, like before I was born, so this was the first time I'd seen it. Really cool part of the episode. And the last part of the episode states that despite the fact that the Sahara is so bleak, a lot of the nutrients are locked up in some of the old lakes. Like the biggest lake in the world was in the Sahara before it became the Sahara. It basically gets washed out to sea and actually provides nutrients to the Amazon rainforest. Pretty cool stuff. I thought that was a really good way of ending the episode, because we talked about the destructive power, the apocalyptic nature of the Sahara Desert. The fact that we end it in kind of a lighter note, talking about how it's actually quite useful for other parts of the world. It's quite a cool way of ending the episode. I thought it was pretty cool. And then the diaries is all about the people filming the silver ants and the dunes. The silver ant bit in particular is pretty cool. You get a sense that they really bonded with the ants as it went on, and they were kind of performing little experiments with them. I imagine it was a pretty frustrating shoot to be on, because, you know, filming ants is pretty difficult, and filming the fastest ants in the world is also, you know, even more difficult. And the dunes as well was cool. They did get their stuff vandalized, but they were still able to get really cool shots. I thought that was really good as well. So yeah, this episode is, again, really good. It's probably my least favourite of the first 5 though, but just because the Sahara Desert doesn't have as much in it. You do feel like this episode kind of had everything that's in the Sahara in it, to be honest. The other ones you kind of feel like you were looking at, you know, lesser known animals. With this one it was kind of like, right, we've got to show everything, because there's really not that much there. Highlights for me, again, the silver ants are the highlight for me. Other things, I like the crocodiles, I like the zebras, the dung beetles, pretty cool. The dunes, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to like here. I think it's a pretty good episode. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode, what were your highlights, let me know. And I'll be doing the next one next week, which is the last one, which is all about kind of conservation across Africa, so look forward to that. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to, it's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.